She ran out of her house screaming like a banshee. "He's lying. My son would never do that," she yelled, pointing at my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, who was holding her bleeding head and crying so hard. She couldn't even breathe properly. The neighbors had already gathered, most with their phones out, some just frozen in shock. I stood there, gripping my phone. The 911 call still active, my voice shaking with rage. 15 minutes earlier, my daughter had just gotten off her school bus. It was a normal sunny afternoon. She was walking past Karen's driveway like she did every day. But today her son, 17 years old, twice her size, was standing there with a baseball bat in his hand. And for some twisted reason, he swung it, not at the ball, at her head. She collapsed instantly, blood all over her pink backpack. That image, it's burned in my brain forever. Karen came out after the scream. She didn't ask if my daughter was okay. She didn't call an ambulance. She didn't even flinch. She just pulled her son behind her like he was some innocent toddler and said, "She probably tripped." My son's never violent. That's when I lost it. "There's a security camera on the lamppost," I said, pointing without even looking. "This whole street has footage. You better pray the cops get here before I do something I'll regret." She smirked. "You think the police care about some immigrant kid with ketchup on her face? Get off my property." I looked at her, then looked down at my daughter's face, still crying, her breath shaking, and something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in cold surgical clarity. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know what I'd done for a living. She didn't know that I used to train federal interrogators on how to break liars in court without touching them. So I stood up straight, looked her in the eye, and said quietly, "Karen, you just declared war on the wrong family." Karen's smug little smile twitched for half a second, but she caught herself. She still thought this was her kingdom and she was the queen. She didn't realize her crown was made of paper. The sirens echoed before the lights even turned the corner. 2 police cruisers pulled up fast. I waved them down, still kneeling beside my daughter. The female officer stepped out and rushed over to us. "She's bleeding heavily from the scalp," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. The attack weapon was a baseball bat. The attacker's inside the house, minor, 17 years old. His mother's covering for him. Karen burst in like she was on Broadway. "He didn't do anything. This man is making threats against my family. He needs to be arrested." The male officer turned to her. "Ma'am, we haven't even started the investigation." "Well, start with me," she huffed. "I'm the president of this HOA." And there it was, her first mistake. The officer raised an eyebrow. "That's not a law enforcement title, ma'am." Karen laughed sarcastically. "Well, technically I can press charges if someone's disturbing the neighborhood peace. I've done it before." I stood up slowly and handed over a USB stick. "Here's the footage. Streetlight cam. Shows her son attacking my daughter. I pulled it wirelessly before you got here." The female officer took it. Karen lunged forward to grab it out of her hands. "You're not even allowed to access those," she barked. The officer stepped back. "Ma'am, that's city-owned surveillance. If he accessed it legally, that's not your concern. Now step away or you will be detained for obstruction." Karen's eyes widened. For the first time, she looked unsure. But she wasn't done. She smiled suddenly like she remembered a cheat code. "Fine. You want to play this game?" she said, pulling out her phone. "Then I'm calling my cousin. He's a sheriff's deputy. Let's see what he has to say when he gets here." I didn't even blink. I just said one line, quiet but sharp. "Then maybe he and I can compare badges." She froze. The male officer looked over. "You a cop?" I pulled out my old ID case, not a badge anymore. But the federal emblem was still etched into the leather. "Retired. Federal Interrogations Division. I trained half the sheriffs in this county." Karen turned ghost white. For once, she had nothing to say. The silence was heavy, so heavy, you could feel the weight of it pressing down on everyone's chest. Karen's face twitched. Her hands trembled just enough for me to notice. Her son, standing behind the glass door like a shadow, had vanished from view. The female officer handed the USB stick to her partner, who walked back to the cruiser to review the footage. Karen tried one last time, her voice suddenly soft, almost innocent. "Look, maybe it was just an accident. Kids play rough sometimes. No need to destroy a boy's future over a misunderstanding." That line lit something on fire inside me. I turned and stared at her. A misunderstanding is when someone spills juice on your carpet, not when your son nearly kills a child with a bat. You've been lying, covering up, and trying to manipulate the police since the moment this started. Karen took a half step back. It's not like that. But the male officer returned before she could finish. His face was hard now. I've reviewed the footage, he said firmly. It clearly shows your son standing on the sidewalk with a bat. The girl walks by, says nothing, and he strikes her. Full force. No provocation. No warning. Karen blinked rapidly. But he has issues, ADHD, he didn't mean to. The officer cut her off. This isn't a school suspension we're talking about. It's felony assault. And if you interfered with the investigation, which you did, we're adding obstruction charges. Her son was now being escorted out of the house in cuffs. His face was red, eyes down. Karen tried to block the officers, but the female cop stopped her with a simple hand signal. You interfere again, she said coldly, and you're going in too. Karen looked around like she was drowning. Neighbors were filming everything. Every eye was on her. But then she made her biggest mistake yet. She screamed loud and raw. This is racist. He's targeting us because we're white. The entire street went dead silent. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. I slowly walked toward her. Calm, quiet, dangerous. Your son attacked my daughter, I said, my voice low. She's 8, he's 17. And you're standing here playing the race card instead of calling an ambulance. And then I said the one line that cracked her. You better hope she doesn't slip into a coma tonight. Because if she does, you're not just going to jail. You're going viral first. Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face twitched like a glitching screen. She didn't know whether to scream or cry. The neighbors had gone from whispering to recording openly. Some were already live streaming. She knew it. She could feel the spotlight burning her skin. That's when her son started crying. Loud, full sobs. Mom, you said they wouldn't do anything. You said it was fine. The officers paused. Karen snapped. Shut up! Don't say another word. But it was too late. Every phone on that block caught it. I told him to swing the bat before she got to our driveway. The boy sobbed. You said she was just another noisy foreign kid. Stop talking. Karen shrieked, lunging toward him. The male officer grabbed her mid-motion and slammed her against the patrol car. That's it. You're under arrest for obstruction, child endangerment, and tampering with a felony assault investigation. You can't arrest me, she screamed. I run this neighborhood. He didn't even flinch. Not anymore. As he read her rights, she kept kicking and yelling. But no one helped her, not even the neighbors. She used to threaten with HOA, fines for having the wrong shade of mailbox. One of the older ladies across the street whispered, just loud enough for her phone to pick it up. All that power. And now look at her. Screaming in cuffs like a criminal. I sat in the back of the ambulance with my daughter, holding her hand, trying not to cry in front of her. She was stable but needed stitches and scans. The paramedic glanced at me. That was your wife on the phone, right? She said she's flying back early? I nodded. She sounds tough. She is, I said. She trains SWAT teams. He blinked. And I added, Karen picked the wrong family. We don't bark back. We bury you in court, legally. And in that moment, I saw Karen in the back of the cruiser, her face pressed to the glass, her lips trembling, not with anger anymore, but with fear, because deep down, she finally realized this wasn't just some immigrant dad she could bully. This was the beginning of the end. For her. Karen was officially booked that night. Mugshot, fingerprints, the whole deal. It was poetic. The woman who used to knock on people's doors with fake citations and HOA. Threats was now behind a locked steel door, begging for a phone call like everyone else. The local news picked up the story by morning. Headline read, Co-president and son arrested. After brutal assault on 8-year-old girl, victim's father was former federal agent. It went viral by noon. The footage I handed over to police leaked. Karen screaming, her son's confession, the racial rant, all of it, all over social media, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere. And every comment said the same thing, that Karen picked the wrong house. She thought HOA power could erase a felony. Real justice served by a silent dad who knew the system better than her. Meanwhile, my daughter was recovering faster than anyone expected. She had a concussion and stitches, but her spirit, still bright, still brave. At the hospital, one of the detectives stopped by my room. She's lucky, he said. That swing could have killed her. I nodded slowly. I know. He hesitated before speaking again. Off the record, you handled this better than most would have. I didn't have a choice, I said, looking at my daughter coloring beside me. People like Karen, they count on us losing control. That's how they win. But when you stay calm, stay smart, you don't just beat them. I looked the detective dead in the eye. You erase them. He gave me a nod of respect, the kind only a man who's seen the system from both sides can give. And as he walked out, I knew this wasn't just personal justice anymore. This was the beginning of a reckoning. A week later, Karen's house had a foreclosure notice taped to the door. Turns out she'd been using HOA funds to pay her personal bills, trips, spa days, even her son's expensive private disciplinary therapy. Once the HOA board saw the viral videos and started digging, the whole rotten empire collapsed. Her presidency stripped, her bank accounts frozen, the same neighbors she used to fine for garden gnomes and fence height. They voted to dissolve the entire HOA, and the cherry on top, someone spray-painted her garage door with 4 simple words. Not above the law. I didn't do it. I didn't need to. Real justice was loud enough on its own. In court, her son pled guilty. He got juvenile detention, court-ordered therapy, and mandatory community service under supervision. Karen, though, wasn't so lucky. Obstruction of justice, lying to police, child endangerment, and financial fraud. Her lawyer tried everything. But no one forgot the footage. No one forgot the scream. No one forgot the blood on my daughter's face. Before sentencing, the judge asked if I had anything to say. I stood up slowly, looked Karen dead in the eyes, and said, "You didn't just hurt my daughter. You weaponized fear, power, and privilege. But you forgot one thing. Real power doesn't scream. It waits. And then it ends you." The courtroom was silent. Karen sobbed in her seat. The sentence was read. 5 years. No parole. As the bailiff led her away, she glanced back, eyes hollow. I didn't blink. Outside the courthouse, my daughter held my hand and asked quietly, "Is the bad lady going away forever?" I smiled gently. "No, sweetie. Just long enough to remember what forever almost looked like." We walked off together into the light, free, whole, and finally bound safe. Because in the end, she didn't just mess with a father. She tried to destroy a family, and she learned the hard way. When you pick a fight with a quiet man, you better hope he's not the storm. The end. Subscribe my YouTube channel for more stories.